On April 12, 2010, Dungeoneering was released into the game. It was an extensive skill with powerful top-tier rewards. Nearly 14 years later, Dungeoneering is a shadow of its former self. A skill disliked and avoided by many. And Daemonheim, well, that's a wasteland. Here's why. Whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Dungeoneering was quite the skill release back in 2010. If it were to be released today, it would have added a load of new challenging bosses, interesting rewards, and best-in-slot gear that anyone could obtain by literally just training the skill. Kind of similar to how Necromancy now rewards players with tier 90 weapons and gear, except instead of killing bosses and doing challenges, you get them through XP and tokens. Nowadays, the utility from many Dungeoneering rewards, including those added post-release, remain to be quite relevant. We still use resource dungeons, the gem bag, skilling scrolls, charming imp, bow necklaces, and occasionally even chaotic weapons still have their time and place to shine, but they are far from best-in-slot weapons nowadays. Leveling Dungeoneering, at least to an extent, is essential to account progression. So why is it that almost no one traditionally trains Dungeoneering? It can't be the lack of rewards, as they clearly still exist in today's meta. No. There's something up with the skill and the way it's trained. You see, the items I just mentioned don't even require you to ever step foot inside a dungeon. You're able to gain Dungeoneering tokens, the currency which you obtain while Dungeoneering at a 10-to-1 ratio compared to XP, through other means. Examples include sinkholes, microtransactions, event boxes, and elite dungeons. It's possible to get all the Dungeoneering tokens you could reasonably ever need without touching the procedurally generated dungeons at all. So what about Dungeoneering experience? Well, that too can be obtained outside of Daemonheim through events, farming elite dungeons, and of course, microtransactions. What a surprise. Now, while the Dungeoneering XP rate has been nerfed from elite dungeons, you can still trade in your tokens you get from farming the mini-bosses for direct experience, making combat a slow but feasible way of training the skill. It's no secret that microtransactions have made many skills easier to train, including Dungeoneering, and I'm not really against speeding up mundane grinds. However, I've observed a greater number of individuals depending on microtransactions to level up their Dungeoneering level compared to any other skill in game. And in all honesty, even I am guilty of this myself. While I've done my fair share of Dungeoneering floors, no, I'm not coping, I poured a lot of prismatic lamp freebies into Dungeoneering to get a bunch of bonus XP to get 120 over with more easily. Now, that's not to say I didn't enjoy Dungeoneering, because I definitely had fun getting faster, but after a while, the skill does get old and it does feel a little bit frustrating with how clunky it can be. That's when I resorted to treating it as a daily, only doing my daily challenges and throwing a bunch of my free daily keys into the Dungeoneering skill. Now, Dungeoneering is one of the few skills where getting better actually improves your experience per hour. Puzzle knowledge, knowing how to move around, and being able to speed up certain actions all improve experience per hour. There's so much depth to Dungeoneering that it takes longer than any skill, with the exception of PVM, to truly master. PVM meaning, of course, combat skills. There's a reason my Dungeoneering guide is nearly an hour long, and that's while trying to keep it concise and straight to the point. Unfortunately, this also means that the skill floor to get decent XP rates is quite high compared to practicing porcelain annihilation in the bathroom or clicking a tree with your augmented hatchet. Now, I'm sure I'll get at least one comment from someone calling Dungeoneering a minigame, and honestly, that's not a discussion I want to have around this video. Whatever you feel Dungeoneering is, at least we can all agree it requires skill and practice to get better at, and you are rewarded for doing so. But having to know all of these things to train it optimally can feel tedious. There's just so many different bosses, puzzles, and riddles to know. Puzzles are time-gated, others are infuriating when failed, or rely on others to perform a simple action like emotes, which, if you're familiar with group Dungeoneering, can be such a lame obstacle to continue progressing through the dungeon. Bosses are no different. There's lame bosses, there's bosses with unnecessary time gate mechanics, and more. I will say that over time, Dungeoneering has become more manageable with how strong Runescape players have become. You're also able to skip annoying puzzles with the Trailblazer outfit and lock melters, allowing you to skip at least 2 puzzles in a dungeon, especially useful during larges. Usually you'd pick a slow puzzle like barrels or the bookcase puzzle to save time. But, as my community poll suggests, The skill being complex or annoying isn't the biggest reason why players dislike it. At least, the players voting on this poll. While not the only reason players dislike Dungeoneering, the poll option that won the most votes was players hating to need to rely on other players to get the highest XP rates possible. You not only need to play actively for these XP rates, which is something not many players like, as I've talked about in another video about how Runescape players love their AFK content, but you need to do it with others, which is another thing a large amount of players do not like doing. I mean, even Jagex knows this, as they've been releasing scalable or small group content instead of large group content, such as Raids 2. Finding a group of 5 players for Dungeoneering is and has been exceptionally difficult, with the exception of paying for floors, which is leeching, or playing during a double XP event, the only time at which Dungeoneering is kind of active. On top of that, players sometimes leaving groups after a single dungeon due to different schedules or because of the prestige system and players having different floors open will again leave you frustrated and annoyed as you're missing players, therefore being less efficient. And I'm sure some of you out there will be like, but it's all about fun, right? Who cares about being efficient? Well, unfortunately, a lot of people do. Especially when they're trying to get one of these skills out of the way for completionist cape or max cape. Why? Because they don't like the skill. Now, Jagex has been trying to make solo Dungeoneering more rewarding ever since its release. Take this clip from a video back in 2012.
We've increased the rates for everything that isn't a 5-5 dungeon. We've used that as the benchmark. We made an assumption that the bigger and the more people in a dungeon, the harder it gets. But in reality, the players have proved that that's not really the case and they actually have an easier time. So to help the solo guys and the smaller groups, we've increased their rates by changing a few numbers behind the scenes. It won't fly up ridiculously, but you're going to see a much better return for the time you put in.
And more recently, an update in May 2022, solo Dungeoneering became more rewarding as well. This was the same update that let Iron Means Dungeoneer together for once, which, speaking as a non-Iron Man player, took way too long to implement. Right now, solo XP rates are not bad for RuneScape skill. You can easily surpass 1,000,000 experience per hour doing solos, assuming you've prestiged after clearing all your floors and all that. In fact, here are my first high-level floors I've done since I got 120 Dungeoneering and basically quit. Both equal a base XP rate of over 1,000,000 experience per hour, and all of them were done by myself. Also worth noting is I don't have 3 gatestones, I only had a single regular gatestone and the group gatestone. And remember, these are base XP rates. If you have bonus XP or it's a double XP event, you could easily be popping 3,000,000 experience per hour. And if you're using wild cards or a preening Ibis card, well, you're getting even more experience per hour. Now, if you don't have lock melters or the Trailblazer outfit, it's going to be a lot slower, but it isn't like Dungeoneering is a slow skill. It's just that when doing group Dungeoneering, you're able to clear floors much faster, resulting in double the XP rate, if not more, than compared to doing it alone. With all of the amount of easier, less complex ways of training Dungeoneering, or just lamping and dummying it, as some players do with their daily keys, it only makes sense that Dungeoneering is becoming less and less popular. People love AFK and the simplicity of logging on and just grinding away. Don't really like interacting with others, and it's hard to find a group that consistently wants to Dungeoneer with you. It's honestly a chore. So is it worth fixing Dungeoneering or reworking it? I don't think so. I reckon Jagex would be better off designing new content that rewards Dungeoneering XP, like Fort Free instead of updating the player-owned house. Sure, the skill needs some quality of life changes and patches, but reworking the entire Dungeoneering skill would be a waste of resources. So far, the only bit of Dungeoneering related content we know is coming is the Demoheim dig site, if that gets the green light that is, and whether or not Dungeoneering will actually be a part of that update and not just archaeology is unknown. For now, I think and kind of hope it stays the way it is, as resources are needed elsewhere in RuneScape. For the select few players that still do and enjoy Dungeoneering, I salute you, and be sure to let me know what you think of the skill down below. With that being said, we've come to the end of this video, and if you enjoyed it, drop a like down below and maybe even consider subscribing, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.